Well, to explore this topic in more detail, I spoke one-on-one with panelist Tu Ngo. Now, Tu is the co-founder and chairwoman of YOLA, your online learning assistant. That's an educational services provider in Vietnam. And I asked her how well-positioned Vietnam is to adapt and make the most of the technological disruption.
I think on the good side, we do have a lot of young technical talents who embrace new learning and just new ideas working with firms overseas already. On the other hand, we don't necessarily have the data infrastructure in place yet to really embrace the advantage of AI, and so a lot of the AI entrepreneurs from Vietnam I talked to actually would have the mindset of going regional, if not global, from day one, because just firms and market in Vietnam probably are not at a point where they can really maximize the value of AI yet.
What sort of policies are in place to really help support Vietnam's startup ecosystem, and what policies would you like to see put in place?
I think as an entrepreneur, the most practical policy that we would want to see from the government is more incentives for either overseas or Vietnamese venture capital investors to invest into startups in Vietnam. So that could be tax incentives, that could be just make it a lot easier for investors, for investments to channel into the local startups. But other than that, I think there's a lot more we can do around bringing the engineer students, the technology students together with the business, the social sciences students, because in our university system locally, usually these students do not know each other. They study in different buildings, they're far away from each other. So there's not a lot of cross-disciplinary learning, and that's something that actually for good startup teams to come up later on after they graduate, you need that sort of diverse team, diverse skill sets. So if the government or just in the ecosystem, we can bring these young talents together, I think that would be a good long-term pipeline for the ecosystem.
So it's interesting because in terms of education, you have these two separate pipelines essentially going to the same place. Why do you think they're not just having them join forces in these schools?
Well, I experienced that when I went to college in the US. So at my university, we have a lot more interdisciplinary programs. We have a lot more classes together. I think in Vietnam it's just by legacy. We have more single kind of disciplinary university system. And also I think just the whole idea of getting into a liberal arts university, not knowing what you're going to major, and then as you move on, explore different things and meet different friends, you're going to decide what you want to study. That's something still very new to Vietnamese families. Usually at 18 years old, we would have to choose, are we going to be an engineer, we're going to be a doctor, we're going to be a business, and just study that for 3 to 4 years. So it's probably both culture and legacy that still doesn't bring the different groups of students together.
So you focus on education as well as entrepreneurship, but a lot of times with companies, all you ever hear about is the bottom line, and the sort of human potential that you're committed to seems to get left behind. Why do you think it's important to balance the two?
I think at the root of being an entrepreneur is really to see how we can reach that level of self-actualization, actually. Because if you think of it, given the risk, the difficulty of it, the whatever social stigma that people will give to entrepreneurs for places like Vietnam, it's not a rational decision to be an entrepreneur. For the first few years of your life after college, you could also work somewhere and get the skills training, and those are the types of advice that I got back then. But the self-actualization is a calling for bringing out your potential to maybe create something useful for others. So I think as an entrepreneur on an individual level, that's already that part of human potential. I think because in our field, YOLA works on unlocking our young students' potential. So it's actually going to be a responsibility for us to also help our teachers and our team to unlock their potential. I do have a few team members after a few years at YOLA as teachers or as members of marketing team. They're like, now that I think more about it and reflect about it, actually maybe my dream is not in education. My dream is somewhere else. And that's great. That's great that they actually have that question and really dwell on it and get some directions. And that's the sort of like environment that I would love to be a part of building it.